Innsmouth, stranger.
Hi, I'm Rob Whiten from the Innsmouth Book Club. Join me and my fellow guide John Chadwick as we take you on a fortnightly tour of Innsmouth. We visit places such as the Picture House, the Library and Innsmouth Museum to discuss all aspects of weird fiction, whether it be book, film, music, TV or art. As well as that, we stop over at the Gilman House to have a chat with a resident guest. That includes authors, artists, musicians, in fact Lovecraftian creatives of all types. You can find our free shows on Patreon, and there you can also sign up as a patron, which brings you bonus content, plus a monthly PDF copy of Innsmouth News, which features articles, author spotlights, all the latest news and reviews, and more. You can find us at patreon.com/InnsmouthBC. We hope to see you soon, because remember, Innsmouth isn't just a place, it's a state of mind.
This episode is brought to you by Donner. Check out the show notes to find a good deal at Donner. Like the sound of this? This is the Donner Island Delay, and the really cool Donner LP that I've shown off on Instagram. Check it out. They've got some really good summer deals, and check out their snap deals as well. Use the link in the show notes to help support the show. Get yourself some cool musical instruments, maybe some patch cords. Cool. This episode is brought to you by California Tea House. California Tea House is a family-owned tea store where you can find some of the world's best loose-leaf tea and organic herbal tea blends. Like a fine wine, there is no comparison between fine loose-leaf and common broken-leaf tea bags. So, check them out. Check them out. They have quite a bit of pretty awesome tea collections. I'm a huge fan of their white teas. They have a tea club that you can join, but, they've got green tea, black tea, white tea, oolong, that Robios and herbal tea. They've also got teaware. So check out California Tea House in the show notes. You're listening to KZOM, Oleander Public Radio.
Greetings, listeners. It is I, D.B. Spitzer and Farmer Dave, here once again to talk to you about the Cthulhu mythos, its books, its monsters, its unfortunate human casualties, its timeline in general, and even its tangential bits, like the dreamlands or things of a weird nature that are Lovecraftian leaning. Once more we head into those dark woods, further feeling those malevolent forces upon us. Once again we walk down the lightless stone staircase in the middle of nowhere.
You're listening to KZOM. Hello everyone, it is I, D.B. Spitzer, and as always, my co-host and cohort, Dave, Farmer Dave, David Heath. How's it going this week?
It is well.
Yeah? How's everything out on the farm?
It's getting there. It's that time that we can't talk about very loud out loud.
Gotcha.
It's where the boy goats become weathers.
Become what?
Weathers.
Oh, okay.
That means a goat that has no sex.
Oh, I gotcha. Like a gelding for horses.
Yes.
I feel like we've had this conversation before, probably last year.
Probably have.
All right. Well, one thing that I know that's cool that's going on, not this week, but next week, or maybe the week after, the 11th of September, Dave and I are going to be at Rose City Comic-Con talking about what, Dave?
We are talking about Cthulhu in comics.
Cthulhu.
And we are going to have two other people with us.
Nice. Who are we going to have with us?
We will have Derek Cook of Monster Kid Radio.
Cool.
And Scott Ollis, who is a game designer who designed Maximum Apocalypse and Beta Red role-playing games.
Oh, yeah. Scott's been on the show before.
Yes.
And speaking of Cthulhu in comics, today we've got Dr. Brian Psiropoulos, Professor Brian Psiropoulos, talking about video games and Cthulhu, so that's going to be pretty cool. Let's see, we're also talking about two aspects of Nyarlathotep briefly, and then we will be talking Oh, those pneumatic tubes getting so noisy.
Oops.
And then we'll be talking about 4 classes that you can play in 5th edition, and pretty much any edition prior to that. Maybe not 1st edition, but
We'll talk about it. In fact, 3 of them are going to be introduced in AD&D,
Yep.
and one of them will be in the infamous appendix.
Woohoo. All right, so we'll talk about that infamous appendix. And also, hey, if you want to contact us at pgttcm.com. If you want to contact us about, like, stuff that you can't find on the audiobooks, pgttcm.com. If you have a book that you would like reviewed, pgttcm.com. If you have, like, audio that you've recorded that you would like to send in, a poem, interesting article that you've written, anything like that. That's how Dave got on the show, and that's how you can get on the show too. So contact us at pgttcm.com. And while you're there, why don't you go and check out our sponsors, one of our sponsors, and one of my favorite sponsors, which I am not drinking right now because it's 420. I am a big fan of Copper Cow coffee. My favorite way to make it these days is just throw a couple into a big mason jar, pour a bunch of water into it, screw it up tight, stick it in the refrigerator, and drink it the next day. I put about 4 to 5 ounces per bag into it, and it tastes, oh man, it's cold brew coffee, and it tastes amazing. They've got amazing flavors like lavender and caramel and all that kind of fun stuff. Dave, you doing all right there?
I am doing well.
Good to hear. Copper Cow Coffee. Check them out in the show notes and at pgttcm.com. We've got a bunch of other stuff there too. So, Dave, news on the cat race, which those of you don't know, Dave's barn cat Thomas is in the running for cat president of North America and is doing quite well right now. It takes a while for cats to vote, so, and also cats are less notorious for shenanigans and will just accept a presidential loss and just be like, whatever, I'm a cat. And so, Thomas is doing well.
There was a scandal.
What's that?
There was Thomas was involved in a scandal. Basically, his opponent accused him of not knocking off a cup off a dinner table.
I don't believe that. I don't believe that's true.
Trust me, it was my cups.
Yep.
It was not true.
All right.
But that's a cat scandal for you.
That is a cat scandal. That is a cat scandal. All right. Well, we will have some Thomas T-shirts coming up in the shop soon. But one thing you need to check out, especially you, Dave, is the "I'm a Dirty Barbarian" in Latin. With a barbarian with a shield and an axe. So it's a classic image of a barbarian with Latin saying, I am a dirty barbarian. So if you...
How do you say, I am a dirty barbarian in Latin?
I don't have it in front of me right now, but it starts with barbarous, whatever, I am dirty, sum. I mean, barbarous... something starts with an S, sum. So yeah.
Okay. And it's real Latin, not pig Latin?
Correct.
Okay, it's not AI, Arium Bay, Erdy Day.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Okay.
I should maybe make the pig Latin version for other people.
for all us farmers.
Yep. All right. So, that's what we've got going on. And of course, the shop, you can go to pgttcm.com and check out the shop and see what all kind of cool t-shirts we have. and you'll find something that you like. All right, so Dave, let me tell you about a couple of aspects of Nyarlathotep that I kind of like.
Okay.
Today we're going to be talking about the Black Demon and the Black Lion. The Black Demon is not known to be worshipped anywhere. It's a black, furried, snouted monster that fears the light, though it's not harmed by it. There's a formula found in the Negril Kull in a set of tablets in Aklo. Summoner may control the Black Demon using a certain talisman, though you might get attacked. And the Black Demon is much like the Dark Demon in its form, but less intelligent. And we'll talk about the Dark Demon when we get to it. And it is from One in Darkness, the story by Isenwill and Lyons. The other one I wanted to talk about, and I don't know which one this is from, but I've seen images of it and photoshopped statues of it. But it is the Black Lion. It's another Sphinx. It's another Sphinx. But this one doesn't have like psychedelic.
The universe in its face.
This one has the universe in its face. This isn't the one that has like psychedelic radiations of its head going in all directions. But it's a gigantic Sphinx bearing a face of utter darkness. Oh yeah, this form is only appeared once in dynastic Egypt, but the destruction it wrought was horrendous. It might have ties to the beast, which we talked about last week or the week before. And that was story Nyarlathotep, and that's written by Sargent. And yeah.
And that kind of reminds me of Nyarlathotep, the prose poem by Lovecraft.
Uh-huh.
You know, where this time in human form, Nyarlathotep's form basically causes destruction and damage.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, not really cool, but yeah, no, that's what we're.
Fictional destruction and damage is cool. Real destruction and damage is not cool.
Yeah, kind of like guns in real life versus guns in video games. Not a big fan of guns in real life, but man, do I know a lot about fake guns in video games. Speaking of which, I'm still playing Cyberpunk 2077, and I'm slowly doing all the missions, all the side missions. So when I show up to the first major mission, I'm just gonna be like, I'm 50,
well equipped,
50 street cred, level 50. I'm like, my oh man, my cool. I'm so cool. People call me Mr. Cool.
Cool. You're no longer V. You are Mr. Cool.
No, I'm still V. But I mean, it's like I've got a pretty decent tech and pretty decent, or no, oh man, what do you call it? Anyway, I'm good with computers, and I'm really cool.
You're a cryo chill mats chumbata.
Totally, Chumer. And if you don't know what we're talking about, that's Cyberpunk 2077, or just kind of like basic terms of Cyberpunk, the game series, not the literary genre, which we've talked about in the past on the show. So look in the back catalog, and me and Dave will talk about Cyberpunk in various ways. All right, so up next we are going to be, Dave's going to be talking to Brian, and then after that we're going to be talking D&D on D&D, and we're going to be talking about some character classes, so stick around for that, and we'll see you in a bit.
This is Dave's Corner of the Podcast. It is awesome and it's gonna go fast. It's not the interview part. It's not the part where Dave
And we're back. And you may have noticed that DB is not with me, but that's okay. He'll come back. And instead, we have Brian Psiropoulos. Brian, maybe if you could just maybe tell our listeners a little bit. Oh, I forgot to warn you. So either DB will cut this out or the audience, but I actually do live on a working farm. And I don't know if you heard that, but every once in a while there is a rooster named Ralph who hands by my, and I don't think you heard it, but I did. And he likes to sometimes comment on what our guests are saying. So, don't worry, he's positive. He builds people up. But I do actually live on a working farm, so you may be hearing some farm noises in the background.
Okay, well, that's great.
So before I was interrupted by a rooster that no one else heard, Brian, maybe if you could tell us, our listeners, a little bit about you.
Yeah, well, thanks, David. So I'm from Oregon originally, but I'm currently in California. I teach college at Stan State University. Mostly I teach in the English department, English literature and humanities, occasionally some composition courses. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. I most of my work originally kind of focused on Gothic fiction, specifically 19th century British literature, which is what my main area of expertise is. But I've also been really interested in kind of their geek culture descendants, so comics and video games. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from for our talk today. So.
Excellent. And so, of course, the audience doesn't want to hear it, but I want to say it anyway. So you and I are almost exact opposites. I was born and raised in California and moved to Oregon.
Ah.
I am from the 805.
Okay.
Ventura County. But again,
yeah,
people aren't paying good podcasting money to hear us talk about our homes. Let's. I love that turn of the century horror, the pre-Lovecraftian, and I love Lovecraft, but I love the things that influenced Lovecraft. So what are some of the things that you study or teach about it or want to share with us?
Yeah, so I love pre-Lovecraftian stuff too, and some of my favorites, Arthur Machen, obviously, the great god Pan is so good and so important and influential, but I'm a big Sheridan Le Fanu guy. I don't know if you know much about Le Fanu or read a lot of him.
So maybe I have a little theory about Le Fanu.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
So let's throw this out. So Carmilla is probably his classic, right?
Yes.
Now Carmilla hates God, right? As a character trait, she hates God.
Yes.
Because she's a vampire.
Right.
But I think that has a lot to do with Le Fanu's growing up, or not growing, because he was raised by a chaplain, and his wife, and maybe you can tell more about it, became ill and mentally ill. She really grasped onto religion as this attempt to save her life. And I think that we see this in his writings. There's this atheist stroke is from the experiences of him seeing his wife going crazy and grasping on religion.
Yeah, and I agree, although I think I'm going to go a slightly different way with this, which is that, the death of Le Fanu's wife, he wrote about a lot, and it really affected him, and it happened kind of slowly and over time, and so it was brutal. But so part of what he turns to, I think, is I don't want to say spiritualism because I'm not sure if that's quite accurate, but to spiritualists like Swedenborg, he starts reading and he starts working Swedenborg's stuff into his writing. And Swedenborg is I haven't read a huge amount of it, but mostly I've read it through Le Fanu, but it's pretty fascinating. The idea that there are whole choruses of angels and demons, and each of them correspond to specific, not only like specific temperaments and emotions, but even specific people. Like you might have your own kind of personal demon. You mentioned Carmilla, which of course is great. That appears in in A Glass Darkly, that collection.
Yeah.
And the very first story in that collection, Green Tea, is about a reverend, right, who gets possessed by this little demonic green monkey, a very Swedenborgian sort of monster. It's a really fantastically and a really bleak. It's a lot of his stuff is so wonderfully bleak sort of story about a guy who is, hounded until he basically kills himself because he can't deal with this possession that he's experiencing. This little foul-mouthed little demon monkey.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of La Fanu. Is Uncle Cyrus is the first locked door mystery?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suppose so, right? Yeah.
So
that is good.
Are there? I mean, and I realize we could sort of go off probably for hours on this, but what other pre-Lovecraftian influences do you like or really enjoy or would recommend?
Yeah, let's see. I mean, we mentioned Machen and Le Fanu, and those are probably two of the biggest ones as far as the kind of pre-Lovecraftian stuff, but I also like just 19th century horror generally. Stevenson, obviously Bram Stoker, read a bunch of it. Weirdly, my work is mostly about kind of the non-supernatural Gothic, so I write about Great Expectations and little Gothic elements that kind of permeate otherwise realist stories. Is also kind of a big area of emphasis and kind of interest for me. I kind of like a lot of people make fun of it as an anti-Gothic work, but Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey gets called, a Gothic parody, and in some ways it is, but I've always argued that what Northanger Abbey does is it takes kind of the silly 18th century Gothic stuff like Radcliffe and kind of tries to make it real, right? Tries to put it in a context that actually her readers would have understood as existing in a reality somewhat like theirs. So, yeah, stuff, all that kind of stuff I'm really into, of course.
Oh, excellent.
And Frankenstein, obviously. I'm teaching
Frankenstein
next week, classics.
Absolutely. Probably a Blackwood.
I've read a little Blackwood, but not very much. Yeah. I need to. That's a blind spot.
Well, that's if there wasn't something for us all to, we all gotta have something to go for, goals.
For sure. Yeah. So should we start talking about video games? What a transition.
Yeah, let's go. Now I'm gonna be completely honest about video games. I love video games as culture and story. I can't play video games. I make people walk in the wall. But yeah. I love the art. I love the story. I love watching my niece and nephew and my children, their face playing video games. So there's probably a lot you can teach me about video games. So what are some I'm thinking you're sort of specializing on horror video games?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, I'm here mostly to start talking about From Software stuff and Bloodborne, which is a horror game. The funny thing is that when I was first starting to play games, I wouldn't consider myself a horror game fan. Honestly, as much as I love horror stories, horror video games are just too scary for me to really play. I don't like being frightened in that sort of visceral, jump scary sort of way, so I don't really play them. I started playing mostly kind of action games and role-playing games, and basically like a decade ago, my wife bought me a copy of this game called Dark Souls by From Software that had gotten a lot of buzz. Okay. And I played it for an hour, and it's this weird kind of gothic fantasy game, and I sucked at it, and I died again and again, and I hated it, and I uninstalled it and thought I would never play it again, and that was it. That was it for that whole kind of experience. And then the same company, From Software from Japan, released this game in 2015 called Bloodborne, and then that just changed everything for me. That's my favorite game of all time. I'm going to get into in a few minutes as to why. I think what it does with fantasy is interesting. What it does with horror is fascinating. And, of course, the way it plays with Lovecraft, I think, is just inspired and brilliant and really, really, really interesting.
So I'm going to throw out another personal theory, and you feel free to shoot it down. But the things like video games and on tabletop role-playing games, and even except some, just traditional, tabletop games, they're unique in that even though it's artificial, you actually become scared. I can watch a movie and be scared for that person on the screen.
Yeah.
I can read the author's fear and get scared. But there's something about, and I'm a lot more experienced with, say, role-playing games. There's something about Dracula's coming after you. Maybe your character, maybe your guy on the sheet, but it's more real to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And honestly, as someone who's mostly a literature person who started working in video games very recently, it's been a tough sort of kind of adaptation to start thinking about them, because yeah, like in Dracula, you're reading that and you can be scared for the characters, and because you're scared for the characters, you are a little scared yourself. But there's also that inherent remove, right? Like Lucy died, if she existed, which she did not, 150 years ago or whatever it was, right? It's like
Exactly.
But when you're playing a role-playing game or a video game, even if you're playing a named character that isn't you, you are embodying that sort of character. And so whatever happens is happening to you, in a sense, in a much more direct way than it does in fiction, which can up the tension in certain ways, I think. And so that is an interesting difference. And I think that it makes it harder to speak about them in certain ways than it is to talk about a story. The other thing about a story is that a story is close-ended, right? Once it's written, then you read it and it exists as it is. A game is not exactly close-ended, and what I mean by that is it could have a beginning and an end, but also you can, in a video game, die at any point, in which case the story effectively ends for you until you start playing it again, right? And so that also makes it very different and fascinating, and also difficult to talk about in some respects. So.
Yeah, and some games, they're sort of open world. You've done the quest, but you can still go out and explore. There's still things to do even after you've done the storyline.
Right, yeah. You finish the entire story of Skyrim or something, but then you can still go back into the world and there will be another 100 hours of monsters to kill, treasures to get, etc., etc. And that is a very different experience. And, playing some of my favorite games, I've often thought, I've put 300 to 500 hours in mini games, and it's crazy because I haven't put that much time into any novels, but that's because I've read Frankenstein maybe a dozen times, but it only takes 3 to 4 hours to read it. So
yeah, exactly.
It doesn't have the quite same level amount of content. Now, the content is more focused often than a game, which can be messy.
And the game, the endings can change.
True. Yeah. Bloodborne, for instance, has 3 kind of different endings, and each of those endings, your character and the state of the world is very, very different in each one. And so that's interesting too, because someone who plays through a game like that once will see the ending, and that will be how it ended for them. And then later they'll talk to their friend, and their friend will say, no, that's not how it ends. It ends like this, right? And then you got to either play it again, or you got to go to YouTube and watch the endings you didn't get, or it's.
So I don't know, other than the name, I don't know anything about Bloodborne. So what can you tell somebody like me who's just sort of a novice in this case?
Yeah, of course. So let me start, before I get to Bloodborne, let me talk about the Souls games, which are the kind of progenitors of it. So these are games made by From Software, which is kind of a medium-sized Japanese developer. The person who's been kind of the creative director and main force behind them for the last 15 or so years is a guy named Hidetaka Miyazaki, a guy who joined the video game industry relatively late in life, not until his 30s, I want to say. And he joined From and worked on some of the games they were working on, and then there was a troubled fantasy game that they were trying to build that wasn't coming together. He moved over to take control of it, and he basically said that, the game was in trouble. And so if it was a disaster, it wouldn't be my fault. But because it was in trouble, I could do whatever I wanted with it. And so he made this really fascinating, difficult, really weird game called Demon Souls in 2009. Was not really a hit. In fact, Sony, which had paid for it, famously refused to have it basically released in the US. They had to pay someone else to do that. But it was dark, it was gothic, it was kind of existentialist in its sort of viewpoint. A lot of fantasy games are heroic, right? You're a guy with a sword or a spell, and you go through the world beating bad guys, and eventually you save the world. Demon Souls and the games that followed it are not heroic in that sense. There is no saving the world. The world is basically doomed, and all you can really do is extend the doomedness a little bit longer, and hopefully it'll finally collapse sometime in the future. And so after Demon Souls, there was a trilogy called Dark Souls, which are similar. They're all European kind of medieval fantasies. Again, kind of like Tolkien, but super depressed, right? There is no winning. In the Dark Souls games, the basic goal is not to save the world. It's to reignite this kind of great fire that keeps everything the way it is. But the fire is going to go out. And so all you can do is extend the world for another couple centuries or millennia until someone has to do it again. So it is a dying world. All you're doing is extending the doom a little bit longer into the future. And so
that seems very Lovecraftian to me.
Yeah. And it's funny, I was thinking about this earlier. There are little aspects of like Lovecraftian kind of creatures and aesthetics in them. Like for instance, in Dark Souls, there's this boss. I'm trying to remember what it's called. That it rises out of the water, and its head looks like this cute little like dinosaur, like Diplodocus or Brontosaurus head. But then when it pulls fully out of the water, its entire chest cavity opens up into this gaping maw. So it's somewhat Lovecraftian in its aesthetics, that creature. In Demon Souls, there's full-on mind flayers, just like D&D mind flayers, which of course are little baby Cthulhus, right? And so there are little aspects of Lovecraftian content, monsters and stuff, but mostly not. Mostly it's standard European fantasy. You fight like, knights and skeletons and zombies and these sorts of things. That's the content. But in tone, it's very Lovecraftian in the sense that you can't win. All you can do is extend doom. You're not a hero. You're like the chosen undead, but you're only chosen temporarily for this part in time. And then eventually you'll fail and someone else will succeed or fail after you. You are not anyone important. You're just a guy. Right. Humanity is not important.
And the universe doesn't care if you win or lose?
Exactly. Yeah. It utterly indifferent to you, really. You'll ignite the flame for a while longer, or you won't. And then the game will end, right? So Dark Souls and Demon Souls are their kind of series of kind of European fantasy. So the game I mostly want to talk about is Bloodborne. That's 2015. It came out for the Sony PlayStation 4, I believe. Yes. And I think I mentioned at the beginning, the first time I played Dark Souls, I played for an hour and said, I can't take this. I never want to do it again. And then I saw the trailer for Bloodborne and I was like, oh my God, this looks amazing. Basically, it takes place in kind of a fantasy version of maybe an 18th century Central Europe. It looks like it might be Germany or Czechoslovakia, perhaps. The name of the city itself is called Yarnum in the game, but that's the kind of the aesthetics, 18th century Central Europe.
Okay.
And the first trailers show this guy in a trench coat with like this sawed blade running through these streets, cutting up like werewolves into bits, basically. Ooh. Werewolves, rabid dogs. It looks like a Gothic game, right? And that's how it's sold. I believe when it was in production, its code name was Project Beast. But the whole thing is kind of a ruse. You get the game and you start playing it and you're killing these werewolves, and there are witches, and there are these things called vile bloods, which are basically vampires or similar to vampires. So you're like, oh, okay, so in this game I'm fighting all these, Western European folkloric creatures, and it's a Gothic story. Okay. Except, right, that's all kind of a fake out. The entire story is actually this very heavily mythos-influenced story about cosmic aliens, ancient gods, humans trying to wield their power, and the kind of superficial story about werewolves and stuff is just kind of a result of some of these other sort of things that happen in the story.
Oh, okay. So it's like the onion, you just get deeper and deeper layers?
Yeah, I think that is a good metaphor, right? Because it definitely looks like the thing that it is. I went back and watched the very first trailer. I believe it's called The Hunt Begins. It's on YouTube, and you'd have no hint at all that there's anything kind of mythosy or Lovecraftian going on at all from that trailer. It is utterly a surprise that gets sprung at you about halfway through the game. And it's a wonderful one. I mean, when it happens, you're like, oh my God, this is what this game is about. Well, that's fascinating. And then you kind of get more into the lore of it, how it plays out, et cetera, et cetera.
So did the fans accept that, or was there a lot of people upset, or?
I mean, I think they loved it. I mean, there might have been some people who were dismayed. One of the fascinating things about kind of Lovecraftian adaptations is that there are so many movies, obviously, and there are mythos-inspired books, but really, like, video games have become one of the largest places for Lovecraft adaptations. Yeah. And so I think a lot of fans maybe were surprised based on the way the game looked. They were surprised maybe based on the fact that Dark Souls and Demon Souls were just European fantasy, right? I think largely it's seen as a success, and in my mind, it really is a success. And I think part of the reason that it is successful is because Bloodborne is not giving you Azathoth or Cthulhu, right? Yeah. It's giving us a world very much inspired by monsters and ancient gods like that, but they're all newly created for the game. Okay. The problem with doing a Cthulhu game that actually has Cthulhu is that the person playing the game also has a Cthulhu plushie sitting right next to them.
Yeah.
Right? It's like the familiarity breeds, if not contempt, at least passivity, right? Or at least, like, it's hard to be afraid if Cthulhu shows up on a screen. We've seen Cthulhu too many times now.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is create something that is somewhat similar, otherworldly, menacing, indescribable, but that's something that there's not a Hello Kitty version of. Right. So
I completely get that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm trying to think of how much it's worth going into, like, various aspects of the lore. I guess one of the things, I guess I'll mention a few things because I want to talk a little bit about how it, like, channels Lovecraft, but also I think it subverts some Lovecraftian stuff in some interesting ways. At least, and that's kind of what got me excited to start kind of researching and writing about the game.
Okay.
Have you read From Beyond? It's not one of Lovecraft's more famous stories, but
yes.
Yeah.
With the Tingogast machine.
Yes. Yeah. The little, like, jellyfish or whatever that are flying through the air.
Yes.
The way that the Lovecraftian stuff works in Bloodborne is similar to that story, in that these creatures, there's some of them exist all around us, but we're just not familiar. We don't recognize them. We can't see them, right?
And, they're not they don't resonate the same way we do.
Yes. And so there's this part in Bloodborne, after you've done all the Gothic-y sections, you come to Bergenworth College, and that's where some more of the more alien, insectoid, monstrous, more Lovecraftian sort of monsters start showing up in that zone, and you're like, what's happening? What are these weird insectoid creatures? You kill the big boss there. It's this creature called Rom, the vacuous spider. It's a very Lovecraftian sort of creature. And then when you do that, the moon of the world descends. Like, it literally comes lower in the sky, and the world changes. And actually, in a sense, it doesn't change. It's just that you now get to see it now that you've done this thing. The real, true nature of reality, which has been hidden behind this, I don't know, this monster or whatever, this spell it creates or whatever, is now dispelled. And you see that there are these giant insectoid Lovecraftian monstrosities called amygdalae that are everywhere in the world. Like the same city streets that you're running to an hour earlier killing werewolves are actually covered with these giant creatures, and they're really terrifying looking. They're very Lovecraftian sort of monstrosities, and you realize that they were always there. They were always there. You just didn't see them. Okay. And now you know the true state of things. So I think From Beyond may have been an influence there. It's definitely a similar sort of aspect of that in Bloodborne. The main plot of the story has to deal with the fact that people in the city had found that there were remnants of old gods in the labyrinths beneath the city, and that people started drinking their blood, basically. Because it gave these miraculous healing properties. Of course, drinking the blood is what ends up causing all this whole beast plague. The reason that the people in Yarnum are turning into vampires, oh, not vampires, sorry, werewolves or whatever they are, creatures, beasts. Some of them are more simian, is because they've been drinking this blood. And so the healing church, which is the main force in the city, rose to power by giving the people its magical blood, basically healing all their harms. But because of that, people slowly start turning into monsters.
Oh.
Yeah. And so that's what it looks like. Okay, you come to a new town, people are turning into monsters. Well, why? The reason is because the great ones, right, who've been here since time immemorial, and we've been trying to gain some of their power for our own, which of course has gone horribly wrong, as these things tend to do.
So you scratch the surface, and instead of sort of these normal monsters, then you've got these more Lovecraftian, powerful monsters underneath.
Yeah, exactly, right. Very early on, you'll get little hints of it. There's like this creature that's kind of like a mind flayer, but he's wearing rags and he's kind of rabid, so kind of like I don't know, like a little feral sort of mind flayer. And you're like, that's kind of weird. That doesn't seem to fit with what we've seen so far. Again, back in the kind of the first half, the gothic part of the game. But then when you get past that halfway point, all of the creatures are like that, and you realize that was just kind of foreshadowing, right?
Sure.
So, yeah, and the game has this really audacious. It has 3 endings, I already mentioned, and in one of them, basically you wake from the nightmare that you've been kind of trapped in, this whole dream world, probably based on some of Lovecraft's dream stories.
Okay.
You wake from it back into the daylight, and the plague might be over. It's kind of unclear. Maybe it was all a dream. That's one of the endings. But the other 2 endings have to do with these actual like kind of Lovecraftian beings. And one of them you become basically. Should I say this is big spoilers? If you guys
Okay, yeah. So spoilers.
I'm ruining the ending of the games. Fast forward however many seconds you think this will take. So, in one of them you become the thrall of one of these great ones, basically keeping the dream alive. And in the final ending, you actually are reborn as a little infant kind of great one.
Mm.
And it's really ambiguous. Like, are you some form of god now? Are you just a slug? Right?
Kind of like a Lovecraftian end of 2001.
Yeah, that's true. Right. That's a good analogy. Yeah. Just like what is it? Frank Bowman? Is that his name or is that the other character?
That's the other one. David Bowman.
Bowman and Frank Poole. Right. Yeah. Bowman is he the one that gets reborn as the Dark Child? Yeah, it's the same thing here. You get reborn as this kind of weird alien space slug, and are you now a god, or are you just like a literal slug? It's very unclear. And the game never answers that for you. You just have to you have to think about it. It makes you think about everything that you've just done, so which is fascinating.
Yes, it does. I mean, it does sound like a really interesting game. Now, is there maybe before we run out of time, is there any other games you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, obviously the big one right now is from Software. Their new game is Elden Ring, which came out in February. It sold almost 20 million copies at this point and was the #1 game of the year. So probably a lot of your listeners have at least heard of it if they haven't played it. That is a bit more like Dark Souls in that it is European fantasy, but also the plot behind that, somewhat Bloodborne-like, does have a kind of Lovecraftian aspect to it, where there's basically some sort of elder presence kind of infused this woman, Marika, with its godhood, which made her create this whole family of gods and demigods. I don't want to get into it. I don't want to spoil the new game quite as much as I will spoil the 7-year-old game, but Elden Ring is great and does some of the similar things Bloodborne does in a more traditional fantasy setting. So,
and that's the one that George R.R. Martin did a little bit of the world building in, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, excellent. Now, what about you? Do you have any projects or anything you want to share?
I'm excited to be teaching this class that I have this year. I'll tell you about it for a second. It's kind of inspired by my work on Bloodborne, which is that I teach this Humanities 3000. It's Explorations in the Humanities. It's a themed course. And this year, 2022, 2023, my theme will be monsters. So
Oh, nice.
we'll be reading lots of stories, reading comics, watching films about, lots of some Lovecraft, but also, vampires and werewolves, all the monsters. Frankenstein I'm doing next week. To kind of get at some of their cultural meanings, their psychological meanings, their sociological meanings. Why are we still so obsessed with monsters, and how can we use them to really think about ourselves and our world? So, teaching that all this year. Just started. Really looking forward to it. So
that does sound like fun. Now, so sort of our signature question here. So everybody kind of gets this asked, and I know I'm kind of throwing this out at you, but if you could be in charge of any artistic or creative project, don't worry about money, you don't have to worry about copyrights, whatever it is, any format, you've got it. What would it be?
I guess, and this might be partially kind of a scholarly project, but my dream thing is to do a work on Alan Moore's 19th century set fiction, right? From Hell, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, other stuff that he's done set in that time period. The way he kind of translates Victorianism into modern prose in the strange, hyper-real way he does, I think is fascinating.
Yes.
I think what he does with characters from that period, like in League, is really interesting. So I guess my dream project would be to write a partially scholarly, partially popular book, like a coffee table book with, all the great art from those comics in it. That's my dream
would be
project.
fun. That would be amazing. Well, thank you so much, and I've actually learned quite a bit, and we'll hopefully have you on the show again soon.
I hope so. This was really fun. I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, thank you. Hey, thanks so much for putting up with it being, normally we're a lot more organized. It's just,
it's no problem.
Hey everyone, it's me, DB. New sponsor on the show, Glary. Glary offers a great price and better quality goods and services for music lovers. Are you looking for good prices, free shipping, 100% quality guarantee? Glary's got you covered. Guitars, bass guitars, mandolins. They've got saxophones, trumpets, drums. They've got guitar cases, amplifiers, all the stuff that you need without having to break the bank. Inexpensive doesn't have to mean cheap. Check out the show notes to find more about Glary. 20-watt amplifiers for under $50. Hard cases for your electric guitar for under $80. Guitars themselves for under $90. Come on, folks, check out the show notes. Get a Glary.
Prepare for a spine-tingling, nerve-shattering podcast featuring all your favorite monsters. You won't believe your ears when you listen to Monster Kid Radio. Hear your host, Derek M. Cook, and his ever-rotating stable of guests discuss your favorite classics and sometimes not-so-classic monster movies. Subscribe to Monster Kid Radio through iTunes or Stitcher, or visit monsterkidradio.net before the next weekly episode of Monster Kid Radio. Go through the archives for interviews with Sarah Karloff, Victoria Price, and Joel Hodgson. Listen to discussions about movies like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Island of Terror, and King Kong. And don't forget convention coverage from Monster Bash and the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival, Classic Monsters, Modern Talk, and the Head of Rondo Hatton, only on Monster Kid Radio.
Hey everyone, it's me, DB. Just reminding you, we have t-shirts in the shop. Just go to pgttcm.com. Check out all of our cool t-shirts and stickers. Heck, we even got some shelf curtains in there. Keep clean, look cool, have cool stickers to put on stuff. Join us on Patreon, get a free sticker. Or don't. It's up to you. Hey everyone, hey everyone, hey everyone, hey everyone. We hope you've stuck around and you're listening to this now. we have some really cool character classes to talk about right this very moment. We're going to be talking about the fighter, the monk, the paladin, and the ranger. And when it comes down to it, I'll be honest, I've played a monk twice, and once was in 2nd edition, or 2.5, and the other one was in 3.0. When it comes to paladins, I've never played a paladin, and I played a ranger in 2nd edition, and I've played a fighter in every edition of Dungeons and Dragons there is. Normally the first thing I try and play in any edition is a fighter, just to kind of get an idea of how to roll the dice and, how to build your character, like just the basics of trying to get the handle on the rule set, But yeah. But once I understand the mechanics enough, then it's time to move on to either a rogue or a wizard, or, of course, the bard. So, Dave, let's anything that you want to say briefly about the monk, the paladin, or the ranger before we get into it too much?
Well, just when we break down to the individual ones, with the exception of fighter, all of these were introduced in AD&D.
Yeah.
And like I said, monks were were originally with Bard. They were in the appendix of the player's manual. And the thing that sort of about the monks that made him almost unplayable in AD&D was their hit points were D4.
Oh, gee.
You started out with, you get 2D4.
Yeah.
And then it's 4 afterwards. And which doesn't quite make sense for, a martial combat character.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that they kind of justified this is that when you got up to the higher levels, you could basically just touch people and kill them.
Yeah.
But I'm not really sure about the second I didn't really go through a second D&D second phase, but by 3 they kind of got it down to the monks that we know. And my understanding is that they skipped that the monks were never officially released in 4. Or if they were, they came in much later. They weren't in any of the original books.
Interesting. I kind of skipped 4 too. So.
I skipped 4 too. But they were definitely returned in 5.
Okay. All right. Very cool. Yeah. No. So, let's start it with the fighter. We've got the fighter, kind of a basic. It's a base class, but it's not basic. It's 1d10 per level hit dice. Let's see. All armor, all shields, all simple weapons, all martial weapons. Best thing for them is strength and constitution, in my opinion. You get to choose from acrobatics, animal handling, athletics, history, insight, intimidation, perception, and survival, which, depending on your campaign, go with what you think is best, or what you plan on doing with it when you choose your martial archetype at level 3. But prior to that, you choose your fighting style, which you get to choose from all kinds of cool stuff, like load, you dumb, computer.
I was trying to figure out what these ones were. I go, I don't know those ones.
Yeah.
I know defensive is out there, where you get a +1 on your defense or your armor class.
Yeah. Oh, my. Oh, fighting styles. You get things like archery, defense, dueling, great weapon fighting. Let's see. 2-weapon fighting. Those. There's some third-party ones that I'm not mentioning that are popping up. So, Anyway, but yeah, I know. And you can check out other books, of course, and look around the internet for, fighting styles. Then, of course, let's see. There's a lot of cool stuff that comes with being a fighter. You get martial art type features and extra attacks and ability scores and all kinds of fun things like that. And let's see.
And back in basic Dungeons and Dragons and advanced Dungeons and Dragons, what they did instead of around 2 and 3, they said, well, let's create things like give fighters more feats, special abilities. But in the original one, what they did was instead of give bonuses to fighters, they handicapped everyone else.
Yeah.
So magic users could only use darts and daggers and staves. Clerics could only use blunt weapons. Thieves were couldn't go past leather armor.
Sure.
So basically, instead of giving fighters advantages like they do now, what they did is they didn't put in all the things that nerf the other characters.
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah.
And the main thing, though, is they couldn't have magic.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you wanted to get around that, at least on the basic and expert, and then there's also is you play an elf.
Yeah.
And elves were basically, in the first, they were basically fighters / magic users.
Yes. Yeah, no. They, in the past, I'm not quite sure how it works nowadays with feats, but in the past, fighters could take feats, and if you were sneaky about it, not sneaky, but if you knew your way around it, you could figure out ways to make it so that your fighter was a magic user, or you could take character classes, stuff like that. In past editions, notably 3.5, especially in like D&D and Pathfinder, there were so many like third-party things and stuff that was produced for like Dragon Magazine that like spruced up your fighter, so you just didn't have like the cookie-cutter fighter every time, kind of like you had in like 2nd edition and 1st edition. That's one thing that I do like about the from 2.5 to no 4th edition, 2.5 to now, you had options to make it so that you didn't have, like, the same fighter every time. Unless you like playing the same fighter every time, then, just make the same fighter every time. That's cool with me.
Yeah, and feats have kind of been, so feats are still there.
Yeah.
It's just much more difficult to get the feats. You don't get a free one as a human. You don't get first starting.
Yeah.
And I think instead of every 3, it's every 4 now, and you get that if you don't take the bonuses, the stat bonuses.
Yeah.
So feats are there. They're still cool, unless you do alternative human, roles.
Oh, sure,
you don't get a +1. But what 5 does to compensate that is the subclasses.
Oh, yeah. Subclasses are great.
You could do things where Eldritch Knight, where you get a few spells.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. And of course, there's always multi-classing.
Yeah.
As I've said before, multi-classing as a half-elf or elf is always been fun in like earlier classes. I haven't done it in 5th edition because I haven't been able to play enough of it, unfortunately. But yeah. Anything else to say about fighters before we move on to the next?
Other than they're just not necessarily the dumb muscles, so don't just put signs behind them that say "kick me in Dwarvish" because they're gonna beat your character up.
Yep. Speaking of beating your character up, monks.
So yes, monks started out originally in advanced D&D, and like I said, they were in the back. in the appendix, they were unofficial class published in a official book.
Okay.
And the main thing about those monks that were really was the hit points, because you only
1d8
got
now, but yeah.
you only got 4D.
Okay.
And it just did. Almost no one I knew played it unless the GM or DM, changed the rules to raise it up to 8D hit dice.
Okay.
And these are very much set on, of course, Asian tradition as opposed to Occidental monks with shaved heads and writing skills, which are more traditional clerics.
Yeah.
In fact, if I was to go back and to the mind of Gygax, I would say that, and these monks are probably more based on Hong Kong movies than anything else.
I was gonna say Gygax and his buddies in Wisconsin, or I don't remember where. Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, were chilling like villains watching Kung Fu and went like, it would make a cool D&D character. Watching David Carradine being like, yeah, we could be like that, man. But yeah.
Exactly.
They got such great skills to choose from as acrobatics, athletics, history, insight, religion, and stealth. Yeah, making it more of the classical, Shaolin monk as opposed to the Franciscan monk. So, yeah, more, and I don't even know how much people know of Kung Fu or the follow-up, the Kung Fu, the legend continues. Which I remember both playing in my house as a child or and as a teen and whatnot, or whenever they were on. My dad watched the crap out of those.
You know who the part Kane was written for?
Bruce Lee.
Yes, he was.
Yep.
But he was too Chinese.
Yeah. He was too Asian for an Asian role, which... Yeah. Unfortunately... Yeah, no. There's multiple comedians who have done bits on David Carradine and David Carradine not being Chinese. There's... I don't know. Anyway, we're not talking about, David Carradine. We're talking about monks.
So, the weird thing about monks that come on the 3rd level.
Sure.
And I know a couple guys who played at this, but the game, they started associating monks with halflings.
Interesting.
And if you look at the, there'll be some art, but you look at all the monk weapons, like the nunchuck. They basically listed a small size version of all those for damage, and I think they usually did a step down or a -1.
Okay.
But yeah, so around 3, it was almost like it felt like they were pushing monks as halflings. And before that, originally, halflings couldn't be clerics.
No.
They basically, Yolande, the goddess, comes in, but originally they didn't really have a religion, but they then created a pantheon for them. But it did, at least to me, a casual reading, it really seemed they were kind of pushing monks for halflings.
Interesting. Everyone knows if you want to make a kick-ass halfling, you make a halfling ranger. Halfling monk, I like that. I personally, something I've done in the past for the, working for a dragon is kobold monks, which no one expects a bunch of, robed kobold monks to come running down a tunnel. But yeah. And and because of all of the halfling weapons, you can just go, hey, kobolds, here's some nunchaku. But yeah. Anyway, they get all kinds of super cool abilities that I have no idea what any of them are.
Well, one of the cool things is you can weapons that are ranged weapons. You can knock them out of the air.
Okay, yeah.
Or grab them.
Yeah, I know that there's deflect missiles at third level, and but like unarmored movement, I'm like, that's, I don't know what. At second level, your speed increases by 10 feet when you're not wearing armor or a shield. Okay.
Yeah. And also the big thing is that you get to add your wisdom to your armor class.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay.
So, and again, these are going to be unarmored characters.
Yeah.
Now, there's ways around that. So, like the monk, there's a dwarf that you automatically get armor.
Uh-huh.
So you could be like a full armored dwarven monk.
Okay.
But then you're not going to get your bonus for your wisdom on your armor class.
Okay. Yeah, but there's like stunning strike, empowered strikes, evasion, stillness of mind, pureness of body, tongue of the sun and moon. But yeah, and it's like the further you go on, like the more amazing of a person you are. It's like at level 14, your mastery of ki grants you proficiency in all savings throw. At level 15, your ki sustains you, and you suffer none of the fertility of old age, and you can't be aged magically, and you can't die of old age. And also, you no longer need food or water. And it just keeps going.
and in the first version, these were all ways of basically killing someone by touching them.
Yeah.
So I think they did right to move away from that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But yeah, no, you can do all kinds of cool stuff, and sometimes I've heard people say, "Oh, monks are OP," and for me, I'm like, I don't know. I think monks are pretty awesome, but also at the same time, monks really can't have stuff. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's the way monks are generally played, though. That like monks don't carry stuff around with them. It's, I don't know. That falls under monastic tradition, but yeah, that's
and AD&D, I think it limited you could only have 10 magic items. There's like 4 potions, a ring or something.
Uh-huh.
A weapon, but it spelled out exactly what you could have.
Wow, that I was thinking that's like more than I normally dish out to people, because I am really stingy with magic stuff.
And I'm going the numbers off my head, but that's what I remember.
Okay.
It was a limit. I thought it was 10.
Okay, all right, interesting. Anything else we have to say about monks?
No, I think that's it.
All right. After that, we have the Paladin. Paladins are like holy knights for a god. It's pronounced paladin, but I was having fun. Like the fighter, it's a 1d10 per level. And, all armors, all shields, simple weapons, martial weapons, and 2 skills from athletics, insight, intimidation, medicine, persuasion, and religion. Now,
original, and they first came out in AD&D, and they may have been in a Dragon magazine, but the first I saw was in AD&D. They had 2 really hard. Well, they had to be lawful good. And they had to have a charisma of 17.
Okay.
And this was back when most people did the rolls, And I knew a guy, his first character, he rolled up and he got a charisma of 17, and it's just, oh, you've got to be this paladin because it's so rare, and he hated it. he hated being good. So finally, the anti-paladin came out in like one of the Dragon magazines.
Yeah.
So he became an anti-paladin.
Gotcha. Huh. That's fun. Yeah, they can do all kinds of stuff like lay on hands, learn fighting styles, spell casting, divine smite, divine health. They have oaths upon this, auras upon that. I mean, it's a lot of it's a lot of kind of like do-gooder nonsense, in my opinion. No, cleansing touch. They're always able to get rid of the undead really fast, and
So, in ways, I think there may be a combat step up on clerics.
sure, yeah.
You're going up on your combat and down on your magic, but the laying on of hands now, I believe it's 4 points per level.
Oh, okay.
You can also take things like, heal spells.
Sure, yeah.
And the other thing is the smite.
Yeah, but paladins only get 5 levels of clerical spells, or divine spells, or whatever, but you get them back after your long rest, so hey.
And if you use a smite, it counts as a spell.
Yeah. And you don't get 5th level spells until 17th level. You get 4th level spells at 13th. You get 2 3rd level spells at 9th. 2 2nd level spells at 5th. And at 2nd level, you get 2 spells, and it doesn't look like you get any kind of cantrips, but there's enough other things going on with Divine Sense and Lay on Hands. Divine Sense, I do not like Divine Sense. Divine Sense, the presence of strong evil registers on the senses like a noxious odor. The powerful good rings like heavenly music in your ears. As an action, you can tell if someone's evil or is, you know their type, if they're like a celestial, a fiend, or the undead. And within the radius, you can also detect the presence of any place or object that has been consecrated or desecrated within the, as with Hollow Spell. You can use this feature equal to your 1 plus your charisma modifier, and you get it back if you take a long rest. So, Divine Sense, if you are the dungeon master and you forget that someone's a paladin because they've been acting like a fighter or a cleric the whole time, that can mess up your plans unless you've got a powerful necromancer who can cover that kind of stuff up. Or use proxies that have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's my DM tip for the day. But Divine Sense is kind of one of those really cool things. And Dave told us about Lay on Hands. Any other cool things? They've got Divine Smite, Divine Health. Divine Smite, it's starts at like 1d8, I think, or is it 2d8?
It's one of the two. I thought it was 2D, but
Okay,
I could be wrong.
it starts at 2d8, Divine Smite, and you get that at 2nd level, and it just goes up every once in a while, up to, I think, a 5d8, and
But there's also spells that you can add on it, like Thunder Smite, that gives you like Thunderclap or Lightning, so you can combine it. It's going to cost you 2 spell slots.
Sure.
But you could definitely enhance that, and it's really good for like boss battles or final blows.
Oh yeah. And at 3rd level, you've got your god blood that makes you immune to diseases. So, hey, you're not getting diseased. After that, you get you have a sacred oath, which binds you as a paladin forever. And
that being immune to disease, I know some of the older games, for some reason, we have this just abnormal fear of mummy rot. But the paladin was like, I'm immune to mummy rot, and so he would like lead the attack on the mummies.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, geez. No. I remember like being terrified of mummies and basilisks and anything that caused any kind of like serious status change. Like, oh yeah, you got mummy rot now, or oh yeah, you're stone, or anything that like someone had to go get a special potion for, and you're in a dungeon and like 2 weeks away from anything, and no one has a teleport.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Definitely. You get the ability to score improvements, extra attacks, or of protection. Let's see. What is that? That's How would you even describe? It's like friendly creatures within 10 feet of you must make a saving throw. Creature gains a bonus equal to your charisma modifier. Minimum bonus of +1. You must be conscious to grant this bonus, and it goes up and increases to 30 feet. You get stuff like Aura of Courage at 10th level. You can't be frightened while you're conscious, and it slowly increases from 10 to 30 feet. There's just pretty much that kind of stuff.
And I'll say I was playing last week, or 2 weeks ago, I was playing a paladin, and I used that on myself.
Okay.
And I just was unmodified. It was like, and I had advantage too, and they rolled the same. I was one number behind my score for fear, and because I'd used that on myself, I just barely made the save.
Oh. Okay. So, one thing I wanted to talk about before we stop talking about paladins is you mentioned anti-paladins just briefly. Or are they called something else now? I can't remember.
Well, there's, I think, Oathbreakers.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And third, they had the Blackguard.
Yeah. Second edition, I knew it was Anti-Paladin, Blackguard, and now Oathbreaker. But whatever it is, it's your Anti-Paladin. It's your person who decides to transgress against the church. Sometimes just a little bit can be absolved with a vow, but then there's some people who are just like, I show no sign of repentance. You might be forced to adopt another class, such as fighter, or you may make it down the road of Oathbreaker, Anti-Paladin, Blackguard. You live for suffering and pain, or you just don't want to do what your god, or who you chose as your god at the beginning. You're doing your own thing. It can be defined a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of different things to do it. Ask your DM what works best for you.
Yes.
But something.
And side effects of being a fallen paladin might be smiting, your enemies turning against you, your friends turning against you, your enemies betraying you, people mocking you in the street.
Accidentally casting gears upon yourself.
Yeah.
After Paladin, of course, we have Ranger, and I'm going to let you take it away on Ranger for a bit there.
So Ranger, I think Gygax was thinking Arion.
Yeah.
So originally, in the first AD&D, they had to be good.
Yeah.
That you could not be neutral or evil. You had to be good.
Yeah.
And these were not only, skilled, the scouts and skilled, but they were also the protectors of the woods and forests.
Sure, yeah.
And that they had always had, from the beginning, sort of, paladins were scaled down. Clerics Rangers were scaled down druids.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely. I always felt it was like how, yeah, Paladin is cleric meets fighter. Ranger is like druid meets fighter. But yeah.
And I think that they're a fun class, much like druids, but they can be really nerfed if everything is underground.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, playing D&D in high school and college, one of my friends, Bill, always played a ranger, so it was like I never wanted to play a ranger because Bill was going to play a ranger, and why have two rangers in your party? Which now I realize, two rangers in your party, that's awesome. That's like having two clerics in your party from two different gods that aren't mad at each other. Two rangers, like, oh, I'm a this ranger, well, I'm a this ranger, oh, cool. That's awesome. Like having an urban ranger and like a just a basic wood ranger of some sort. That's pretty cool. Anyway.
Yeah, so I think, and a lot of people, and they really worked after the first printings of 5. But they got a reputation as being sort of the least effective class.
Yeah.
The other thing I think a lot of people, and is that old cheesy 80s fantasy movie Beastmaster.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think a lot of people sort of get their idea from, what a ranger might be. Personally, I kind of like as the Monster Slayer. I know a lot of people, I haven't played one, but the Horizon Walker that gets teleporting. So I think that they really have worked hard to try to buff up the Ranger class.
Okay. Huh. Yeah. Oh.
One I think that I liked the Ranger. 2 is sort of is the Gloomstalker.
Oh, what's the Gloomstalker?
So it was originally a advanced race or advanced class. Basically, they're underground.
Okay.
So they're like Rangers for the Underdark.
Gotcha. I remember one that was Dragon magazine in the late 80s, early 90s. It was a Crypt Ranger, and I thought that was a really cool idea because I have so many undead in my campaigns that I was like, hey guys, look, Crypt Ranger. And everyone was like, no, we don't want to do that. That's what happens when we leave your campaign. And I'm like, your characters never leave my campaign. You die. No, I'm not a killer DM. But yeah, no, I generally stick with an area and go with it, and stick with a theme and go with it. So, but anyway, I was like trying to get them to go with that kind of stuff, but I've rejected it when dungeon masters have been like, hey, let's do this, everybody. And I'm like, no, we're in the middle of this campaign. Let's keep doing this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've done it, but I've also griefed people for it. Anyway, speaking of favored enemies, one thing that a ranger gets at first level is favored enemy, and that is like, goodness, it's oh, Gesundheit. Favored enemy, it's like aberrations, beasts, celestials,
Undead.
Constructs, dragons, elementals, fae, fiends, giants, monstrosities, oozes, plants, or undead. Alternatively, you can select 2 humanoid races, such as gnolls or orcs or humans. So, yeah.
Yeah, I want to be a ranger whose favorite enemy is oozes.
Ooze hunter.
The oozologist, yes.
2-handed attack, both clubs. Wood clubs. Both are wood clubs. Because you never know with oozes. Either they're acids or they're electric or who. Anyway. Yeah, they get natural.
Oozologists will know.
Yeah. Natural explorer terrain doesn't slow you down. You don't get lost except for by magic. You can forage, navigate, track with, and also be alerted to danger. If you're traveling alone, you move more stealthily at a normal pace. When you forage, you find twice as much food. And when tracking other creatures, you learn their exact number, size, and how long ago they passed through the area. And there's all kinds of cool stuff. There's fighting style, which again is like archery, defense, dueling, two-weapon fighting. There's spell casting too. You also get different types of ranger archetypes. I don't know. Anything else you want to talk about with what other kind of stuff they get?
I think we've pretty much got them covered.
Okay, all right. The 20th level thing is called Foe Slayer, which I'm just trying to check out right now. At 20th level, you become an unparalleled hunter of your enemy. Hold on one second. At 20th level, you become an unparalleled hunter of your enemies. Once on each of your turns, you can add your wisdom modifier to your attack roll on the damage of an attack you make against one of your favorite enemies. You choose to use this feature before or after the roll, but before any of the effects of the roll are applied. But yeah, they get spells. It's kind of like I don't know, it's kind of like how the paladin doesn't get spells until 2nd level and doesn't really get it's basically the same low spell progression that a paladin has. And I don't know, I think who else has this like kind of crummy slow spell
they
progression?
boosted it up, but the bards were like that for a long time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I know it's the ranger and the paladin that have this kind of like cheesy spell list because they're not full-blown magic users. But anyway, it's good to have that kind of stuff. And I personally feel that not paladins, but rangers aren't necessarily as crummy as people say they are. They're equally as crummy as a paladin, but without being such annoying. I don't know. It depends if you find religious people annoying,
Nature people.
Or nature people. It's like pick your poison. Let's see. And who else are we talking about this week? Is that it?
I think that's our list.
That's it. And next week we've got some really great ones. We've got rogue, sorcerer, warlock, and wizard. Kind of the best of the best, in my opinion. I don't know.
Save the best for the last.
Yeah, definitely.
Ralph agrees with you.
Oh, I know, Ralph. Ralph likes to play a warlock, I've heard lately. So.
Yes.
All right, everyone. Anything else you wanted to say about D&D before we?
No, I'm excited about talking about our next group of classes, though.
Yeah, me too. All right, everyone, thank you so much for listening to People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos, recorded here in Oleander, Oregon at KZOM. You can find us at pgttcm.com. We're on Facebook. We're on the Instagram. We're on the Twitter. And we are on the YouTube. We've got a bunch of different... We've got 2 YouTube channels. One hasn't been updated in probably about 3 years. And another one that has stuff from the original start of the show. And then has a big chunk missing out of it. And then has 15th season and 16th season stuff on it. So check those 2 out. One of them, if you...
It's non-Euclidean.
It's non-Euclidean. One of them, if you subscribe to it, it will never update, but you'll be able to look at the back catalog. And one of them has a bunch of old stuff, and
we'll subscribe to both.
Yeah, subscribe to both. Check them both out. And thank you again so much. And if you want to check out what's going on with us, I do a lot of stuff on Instagram. I do a lot of stuff on Facebook. And I do a lot of stuff on Twitter. And we'll always have stuff going on and keep you updated on things like seeing us at the Rose City Comic Con and also seeing us at the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival, or any screenings that are going on in town, any horror trivia, and by town I mean when I make it up to Portland. Horror films, science fiction screenings, that kind of stuff, trivia, horror trivia, that kind of stuff, and any other things that are going on, conventions, whatnot, film festivals. So we'll talk to you in the future. Thank you again for listening. Subscribe, like, share with your friends, and hit that like button and ring that bell and do what you want to do. This show has been edited and produced by me, DB Spitzer. Middle segment by David Heath. And all the other sections are by me, DB Spitzer, and David Heath, collectively. Dungeons and Dragons is property of some multi-conglomerate massive company. Hasbro. And we do not own D&D. Music, as always, is by DB Spitzer. Thank you again, pgttcm.com. We'll talk to you next time, and goodbye.
Bye.
Everything. Bye.
Bye.
That was a good episode. And also remember, check the show notes, click those links, and find out how you can support the show. We've got a Patreon. We've got a direct link to PayPal. We've got sponsors that you can buy. Donner is having some really good deals right now. And also, I would have to say, check out Copper Cow Coffee. And there's a Stone Ground chocolate company in there that you should check out called Taza. Stone Ground in Lovecraft Country. And yeah, they've got some really good flavors. They don't use dairy. They use vegetable-based milk instead, so it's vegan. Taza Chocolates, Somerset, Massachusetts. We've also got stuff from Curvy Girl. We've got Golden Goat CBD gummies and other stuff. Yeah, if you're looking for a way to advertise on your website, on your podcast, whatever your projects are, your YouTube page, why not go to Share Sale? That's where I get all my sponsors from and pass the savings on to you. You can find that. You can advertise your projects. You can advertise your website, your products, any of that stuff. So check out the show notes. And Dave and I will see you next time. Anything you want to say before we head out into that night again? I said that before, but...
yeah. Good night. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
All music by D.B. Spitzer.
You're listening to KZOM, Oleander Public Radio.